Welcome to this session of Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office, to remind you that drunk driving is the ultimate form of unsportsmanlike conduct. Fans don't let fans drive drunk. Headed out to East Tennessee, Doug Fritz, our guest here as he covers the East Tennessee area, Johnson City Press and Kingsport Times News. Doug, it's a strange time for sure. Give us a quick update on the COVID games or how your schools are faring with that.
It's been pretty good up here. I went and counted everything up last week, and they counted 79 games have been postponed across the state, and only just a handful in Northeast Tennessee. So we've really been very fortunate up here. A couple of schools up here, haven't even been touched by it at all, and some other schools have kind of suffered with it, Sullivan North in particular. But overall, to be halfway through the season for some of these teams is a real blessing, and that's where we stand up here right now.
You mentioned Sullivan North. Sullivan South is 4-0. I assume when they play a school like Sullivan Central, those two schools, real rivals for sure, those games got to be pretty special.
Well, this game in particular was more special than any of the others. Sullivan South came into existence in 1980, back when I was in high school, and they're going to join with Sullivan Central and Sullivan North to form Westridge next year. So this was the last game between Sullivan South and Sullivan Central, a rivalry that has lasted 40 years. They played 39 games, and South did a great job and just ran away with the last one. They kind of dominated that rivalry in recent years. I think that was their, I think it was like their 15th straight win. So just these schools are going to be friends next year, and this is their last chance to be competitors.
Dobyns-Bennett off to a great start at 4-0. We'll take on Daniel Boone next week, but big win, 46-7 this weekend.
Hardin Valley has really struggled. They've given up a lot of points. They've not scored very many, but I'm more and more each week. I'm starting to become more and more of a believer in Dobyns-Bennett. Having the type of team that could really make a lot of noise, even come postseason time. They still got to deal with Science Hill and Farragut in league play, but this is a really good Dobyns-Bennett football team. They can run the ball, they can throw the ball. Their quarterback is very experienced, and he takes care of the ball, but he also makes big plays. They've got an outstanding defense, good football team.
You mentioned Science Hill. They played another 0-for team. Jefferson County really struggling at 0-5, but Science Hill 4-1. Dobyns-Bennett, Science Hill, how do you see that matching up later on?
Well, right now, I think that's going to be a good old-fashioned showdown. Those are probably the two biggest rivals in our area. And when they're both good, people flock to those games. They won't be able to do that this year under the circumstances, but Jefferson County played Science Hill tough in the first half. It was a pretty even football game. Science Hill ran away from them in the third quarter. But Science Hill, they've got just a dynamic passing attack with Jackson Diamond quarterback, and he's got 4 or 5 kids he can throw the ball to. They can stretch the field. They can catch and run. And they've got a pretty good defense, too, so far they've shown. So that's a legitimate showdown coming up. They're both ranked in the state. If they keep going the way that I expect them to go, that's going to be a great matchup towards the latter part of October.
4A Elizabethton dodged the bullet last week. We came out strong this weekend and won 63-16.
Yeah, I kind of saw that one coming. They had a lot of trouble with Daniel Boone. I didn't know before the game that Elizabethton had 3 offensive linemen out because of COVID quarantine, and that made a huge difference against Daniel Boone. And then back to closer to full strength against an overmatched Granger team, and Elizabethton just hit it hard and heavy and just ran away. And they're still a definite threat when it comes postseason time to be in the mix to getting all the way.
Chris, it's why people like Doug Fritz are so special to us, because we don't always know how many players are missing. So when you see a score that doesn't sound quite right, you wonder sometimes how much it has to do with the COVID.
You're right, and Tim, with all of our local reporters, it's kind of that way too, right? And even though you and I are mid-state guys, we don't even know from game to game who's playing and who's not, and we cover it pretty closely. So having guys, sports writers in particular, that follow these teams so closely is a really big deal. Doug, I want to talk to you about Daniel Boone and what a performance they had this last week. Of course, they beat Greenville a few weeks ago, then lost to Tennessee the week before last, and then take Elizabeth down the wire. Elizabethton, excuse me, 23-21 they lose, but really a great ball game for Boone.
Yeah, Daniel Boone. They're the type of team I really thought that they probably could have won Region 1 5A. And I guess they still got an outside shot. The loss to Tennessee High certainly puts them behind the 8 ball. But they played that Tennessee High game without Devin White, who suffered a terrible injury, a broken leg in the Greenville game. And he was not only arguably their second best running back, he was their number one linebacker in the heart and soul of that defense. And so when you add all that stuff up, then you go in against Elizabeth and being shorthanded. But I'm telling you, I watched that game, and Daniel Boone, that's just as gritty and tough as a football team as there is up here, and that reflects on their coach Jeremy Jenkins. That's just the way he coaches and the way his kids play. And Daniel Boone still can make some noise. I just wish they still had Devin White in there, but they're going to have to make do like other teams are going to have to for different reasons. It's going to be a strange year, but they do have a good football team.
Speaking of good football teams, they've got one next week in DB. They go to DB and out of the frying pan and into the fire, so to speak.
Yeah, Daniel Boone, one thing they did, and they've done this many times over the past few years, they just schedule to the hill. They schedule more like a basketball team. Basketball teams who are good will just go out and schedule anybody and everybody and just play the best. We usually don't see that in football, but you do at Daniel Boone. Jeremy Jenkins and that program, they love to play the best football teams. And their record reflects it sometimes, and it's going to reflect it this year too. They're probably going to come out of that DB game 1-4, and yet still be right in the thick for a playoff berth, and for a home playoff game, they're still going to have a shot at that. So it's going to be a tough sell against DB. I just don't see them being able to match up with them for 4 quarters. They may play them tough for a half or so.
You look at the other team that beat them, Tennessee High, and they've got Greenville this week, and Greenville's kind of been up and down, but impressed with the way they played Austin East a week ago. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, it's kind of hard. These teams they're dropping games and they're rescheduling games. That Greenville game just got scheduled a few days ago, and I don't know what to make of some of this. I think that Greenville's probably better than their record. And Tennessee High, they got past Boone, which was a big hurdle for them. They got smashed by DB. I still think Tennessee High is a pretty good football team. We're going to see more in how they match up with Greenville. Greenville's a really good offensive team that struggled to stop people on defense at times. That's going to be an interesting football game. Like I said, sometimes you expect to wake up on a Friday morning planning on going somewhere, and then you find out that the game's been rescheduled and they're playing somewhere else. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes the last 6 weeks of the season.
It should be a good one this week when you've got Chucky Doak and South Green facing off. And we haven't really talked a lot about some of the Upper East 3A schools and below, but that's got the makings of a pretty good ball game this week.
It does. Chucky Doak's got a good program. They've been strong and at the top of Region 1 3A, and South Green has just had a tremendous season to this point, and got an excellent quarterback. And it's the county rivalry. I expect that to be just a Donnybrook.
Well, it's really the way it looks right now. That one has a great chance to potentially be for that region title, does it not?
Well, it's Chucky Doak and South Green, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
so
you're
Chucky
right. It's not a region title. My bad.
Yeah, they're 3A. But it's a county rivalry. They've been in the same league so many times, and I'll be honest with you, some stuff it gets so there's changes, and this year in particular, it's just
I can't keep up.
It's just mind-boggling how things are.
Well,
I struggle too myself.
Well, especially if you're not local, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
The other team I did want to talk to you about was Claiborne. New Tazewell, Tennessee. Now you're gonna have to inform Tim and I where New Tazewell is first of all, but Claiborne undefeated on the season.
Yeah, and that really, they started out with 3 wins over teams that I would have expected them to beat if they had a pretty good football team. I didn't expect them to do what they did to Unicoi County, so they really impressed me there. And that looks like they're going to be a team to be reckoned with in that league. And as far as going to Claiborne, I think I've been there maybe one time back when my daughter was in high school. They had a region basketball game there, and to the best of my memory, you drive to Morristown and then you head up the mountain. So it's somewhere back up yonder there.
That's about as good a description as I could have hoped for. It's actually everything I hoped it would be. Now,
That's a nice place.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
Yeah, it is.
He's Doug Fritz, and we always appreciate him taking the time to join us. We're going to take a quick break and come back with more here on our statewide radio network. You're listening to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office.
If you've been driving, don't drink. The winning play is always designated a sober game plan. Fans don't let fans drive drunk. We're headed to Knoxville to Tanner Carson. It's been a kind of a strange time, Tanner, in this recording PrepWeekly.com. And it's been a strange season all the way around. I noticed that Knox Central kind of went 1-1 this weekend. You got a COVID win and a loss to Powell on Saturday night, 34-18. That's something I didn't know that I'd ever see, but a team can actually get a 1-1 bout in one weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's been very strange. I mean, things are going to continue to be strange like we saw this last week. But I mean, who would have thought that a game being canceled due to COVID would have ended up producing a much better matchup for both these teams involved? Not only talking about Knox Central, but of course the Powell Panthers, who came away with a win on Saturday night. It was 34-18. But guys, I mean, that game wasn't even as close as that final score. That was up 34-3 by the time that garbage time began, and then that's when Central's able to get some points on the board. I mean, the Powell Panthers still having so many consecutive regular season wins going back to last season. Coach Matt Lowe at Powell had to replace so much on the offensive end, as I've talked to Chris with before in the previous weeks when we've discussed Powell. And I mean, to come out on such short notice against the two-time defending Class A champions and just absolutely hand it to them like that on the road is extremely impressive. Powell's up, up 5-0 now, undefeated. Their defense was really the star of the show, getting 2 pick sixes. They blocked the punt, forced the fumble, made a goal line stand in the first half that really kept Central out of it. And then before you know it, I mean, Powell looks like one of the top dogs in the entire state. Looking at today's poll, by the way, Powell, the highest ranked 5A team in the poll. So, I mean, my goodness, this Powell Panthers team is absolutely fantastic to watch.
5A is really the strength of your area, isn't it? There's lots of really good 5A schools.
Yeah, and it's a 5A paradise around the Knoxville area for sure. I think, for lack of a better term to describe it. I think Knox Central, I think they're still going to be okay. This is something that's going to teach them a whole lot. I think they're going to be fine as the rest of the regular season progresses. And I would think, not to mention other 5A programs here like South Doyle, who they had extremely impressive win, 60-20 against a pretty good Sevier County squad. They look like they have found an answer on offense in Sean Gary, who they recently submitted a running back, 169 yards against Anderson County last week. He runs for 200 plus and 4 touchdowns against Sevier County. So let's not forget to mention South Doyle teams like Carter as well. But going back to Central and Powell, I think those two are still probably the cream of the crop. I would love to see that rematch again in the postseason.
Maryville, Alcoa, Meigs County, all at or near the top of their divisions, or classifications. None of those schools really had a test this past Friday night.
No, they really didn't. And starting off with Maryville, I mean, it was pretty much a given. That type of result, shutting out Bearden. Maybe not as much points on the board for Maryville offense as they would like, but I mean, they just cruised to another victory once again against Bearden. Alcoa, coming off the loss to Maryville, they're playing a region opponent in Pigeon Forge. Most people look at Pigeon Forge kind of like, would they be the sacrificial lamb, so to say? And Alcoa ends up winning 42-0. Could have been a whole lot worse though when you talk about those two type of teams matching up. So I mean, business as usual when it comes to a lot of the other teams around here for sure that are still at the top of their class.
Division II AA, you've got a couple teams there right there in Knoxville at 5-0. CAK and Grace Christian out of Knoxville.
Yeah, you certainly do, and fantastic wins for both of those teams this past week as well. Grace Christian, they go on the road. They had their toughest road test for sure of the season so far, a region game against Chattanooga and Notre Dame. Put up 49 points in that one, and I mean, my goodness, here you want to talk about a good quarterback to watch in D2 play. It's going to be Cooper Riggs, quarterback for Grace Christian. He throws 413 yards, but 6 touchdowns on the board as well. Grace Christian, and I talked to Chris about these Grace Christian Rams last week. They have their offense, which Coach Rusty Bradley over at Grace is known for his fantastic offenses, but these guys also have a whale of a defensive unit as well. So love to watch Grace, and right there in that same region as well in D2 2A as is CAK. Also 5-0. You already mentioned him. Ranked number 2 in D2 2A as well. They had the region opener this past week against Silverdale, and they do it as going on the road, shutting out Silverdale 35-0. Having a couple of really key special teams touchdowns, key defense as well. Can absolutely not wait for October 23rd. I know we got plenty of weeks of football left to play, but that's when you're going to have the showdown between CAK and Grace Christian. That one's always a fantastic matchup year in and year out, but it looks like this one might be the most special they've had in quite some time.
Talking to Tanner Carson from PrepWeekly.com, among other things that he's very involved with. Tanner, you mentioned Carter a minute ago, and they're 4-1 in the season. They have a COVID win, and then they have the one loss. 2014 opening week loss to Ray County. They've got South Doyle this week, and what do you make of that one?
I make of that one's going to be very, very, it could be intriguing. I'm going to go ahead and give a prediction that I do like South Doyle in this one, but I would not be surprised if that's one that's still pretty much a ball game by the fourth quarter. Again, I'm more confident in South Doyle over what I've seen the last 2 weeks from the Cherokees, just for the fact that, okay, they were able to actually find an answer in their running game with Sean Gary, someone who started the season as a wideout and contributing on defense. He gets the move full-time to tailback against Anderson County, and then, like I said, mentions numbers 169 on the ground against AC, and then 206 and 4 touchdowns, and that big blowout win over Superior County. They have that answer on offense now, South Doyle does, which makes me like them against Carter, but I do really like this Carter team, though. They had that tough, week 1 loss to Ray County. They lose in overtime, heartbreaking fashion, and they bounce back. They do have the COVID win to give them technically 4 straight wins in a row, but the last 3 times they've been on the field, pretty clutch performances. They go on the road, they beat a Pesky Campbell County team. They end up beating Seymour in overtime. So they're able to win these clutch type of games now after they lost an overtime game at the start of the season, and they go on the road, have no trouble against Lenore City as well. So this is a team that's already been able to win these games on the road. I'm sure they're not going to be intimidated by South Doyle whatsoever. I would definitely like Carter for a wild card type of team to watch out in these races in this region, and also in the playoffs as the season progresses. But right now, I don't think they have enough to take down South Doyle, but I do definitely like this Hornet squad.
Halls is 3-0 on the field and 4-1 overall with a COVID win and a COVID loss. They go into really the frying pan these next 2 or 3 weeks. They've got Powell, Central, and South Doyle coming up, but they've got Powell this week, and right now, to me, Powell's the best 5A team in the state. Yeah,
they are, and just went through today's AP poll as well. I mean, the polls reflect that they are the top 5A team in the state. Halls has certainly been through a whole lot when it comes to COVID-related issues, just at the high school, and not only not to just talk about COVID issues in their locker room as well. It'd be, I think it'd be a very nice opponent for Powell to play, and that's certainly, it's the Battle of Emory Road. That's Powell versus Halls. That's something that's been played for decades and decades. Very, very tenuous little rivalry in the North Knoxville area, but after what Powell put on the field against Central on Saturday night, again, on very short notice, that game was only announced as being official last Wednesday. I don't see a whole lot in the way stopping Powell in the regular season. Now, when it comes to this postseason, maybe it'd be a repeat of what happened last year. They maybe get upset like West was able to do to them last season. I mean, Cal it does have to go on the road to play West on October the 9th as well, so that'd be fantastic. But I mean, right now, I just see Pal as a machine, just running at full strength on all levels.
The Kings Academy is just absolutely rolling right now. Just destroyed Webb School the other night. The last 4 ball games they've won in blowouts. They're favored heavily in their next 3 against Friendship Christian, Middle Tennessee Christian, and even Oneida. And playing what would look like a championship game on October the 16th against DCA, who I think is the other top team there. But right now, I think the Kings Academy has really stood out to me in the way they're playing right now.
They definitely are, and this is a team where when you saw them on the field last season, they didn't really have it all gelled together, so to say, but had an impressive, you mentioned that the DCA team had an impressive upset win over them in the playoffs last season, and it looks like they really used that as a springboard to have the type of start to the first half of the season they've had this year. They have a close one against Seymour. They're literally across the street rival in South Knoxville. They win that one by 7. Then after that, they take it to a Class 3A opponent, Gatlinburg Pittman, and then it has been close since then when it comes to region competition. And you mentioned, Webb School over in Belleville, 50-point victory. I mean, my goodness. And it's these next 2 region opponents, they should get these wins as well. But, as you mentioned, it's almost like a championship game and this battle against DCA coming up later in the season. Love watching this Kings Academy team for sure. Any Tennessee fans that are listening to this, you might need to take interest in the Kings Academy. They got a big boy on the offensive line, Tennessee commitment, Jamarian Gooch. I mean, this guy's, 6'8", 300 and something pounds. I don't think humans should be allowed to be that big, but the Kings Academy has one on their offensive line. They're very fun to watch.
He is Tanner Carson with PrepWeekly.com. You can find all about his content there. We're going to take a quick break and come back with more. You're listening to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office.
For drivers, fans, don't let fans drive drunk. John Varlas with the Daily Memphian joins us. John, I know you'd much rather cover touchdown passes and tackles and all those kind of things, but we have to get around to the idea that Memphis football in a high school this year appears that it may be just not going to happen.
It definitely appears like it for the Shelby County school system, guys. And again, I appreciate you guys letting me come on and talk with you. Yeah, it's real unfortunate. Like we've discussed in the past, there's several municipal school districts and within Shelby County, Bartlett, Collierville, Arlington, places like that, and they're playing, and they have been since the start of the season. And then of course we've got our private schools here in Memphis. But the Shelby County school system, which has, 35 football playing schools, the big public schools, the White Havens, White Station, Ridgeway, Kirby, Mitchell, Melrose, all these people that, people are familiar with around the state, they have not been playing. And like you said, time is ticking out, looking like they might not based on last week's, ruling and news from the superintendent.
What we know is that they'll have to have 2 weeks of practice before they can play. Nashville schools are ready to get into play this Friday night. But let's go ahead and talk about on-the-field stuff. Some crazy things happened this year for sure. MUS, I see it's at 2-2. Their 2 wins are COVID wins. That doesn't tell the whole story. But the other 2 losses to NBA and Christian Brothers may not tell the story either, because both those are pretty good ball clubs.
No, it doesn't. And I think we'll kind of maybe get a sense of what this MUS team looks like Friday when they go play Arlington. That is a game that was not originally on the schedule. It wasn't even originally on the post-coronavirus schedule. Originally, MUS was going to just play a region schedule, but they've since added a couple of games. So it's going to be a good test going out there to Arlington. Arlington's off to a 3-2 start. They've actually played every week. Got a real good quarterback in Zach Baker and talented receivers that can make things play. So that's going to be a good test for MUS. I think I think we'll find out a lot about them. Whether they are, whether they can bounce back from that 0-2 start on the field, or whether this might be a down year for the Owls. We'll see after Friday, I think.
Christian Brothers, we mentioned them. They're at 4-1, a winner over John Paul II. this weekend, 45-21, after bouncing back from a loss.
Yeah, and you guys can probably tell the listeners and even myself better than I can how impressive a victory this was. I mean, Pope John Paul was undefeated. They looked like they had been playing some really good football here from a distance. And I tell you what, guys, Christian Brothers was mad. They were mad as a hornet after dropping that game to Bartlett last week. I talked to one of the assistant coaches, and they said it was old school football practice this week. I mean, they got back to business, and they went up there and really bounced back well against Pope John Paul. I mean, you gotta give your credit to that big offensive line at Christian Brothers, and of course Dallin Hayden, the class of 2022 standout. He just had a remarkable season this year. He's been over 400 yards. He's been over 200 yards in 4 out of the 5 games. And he's already got 15 touchdowns this year. He had 280 and 3 against PJP. And this guy's certainly putting himself right in the front of the Mr. Football conversation in that division. I would think he's just been tremendous this year.
John, I don't know how far you reach out to Mumford and Brighton, up Highway 51. Those two schools not too far apart. They don't get a lot of press, but pretty good football game this time. 34 Mumford with a win.
Yeah, it was a pretty good game. We cover them, not as thoroughly as some others, but we do cover them. And with the job that Coach Calhoun is doing in Mumford, they're off to a pretty good start. They started, they played St. Benedict a couple of weeks ago, and that game was maybe a little bit closer than it could have been. But since then, it looks like they've responded well. They got some good running backs over there at Munford. Travion Hawkins and Alvic White are 2 names you need to know for the running game. And it's a community up there with a lot of pride in the football program, and they want to win. And they're hungry for a consistent winner, and Coach Calhoun may be the guy to get it done up there.
Talking to John Varlas, the Daily Memphian. John, we interviewed Coach McDaniels last week. Kind of get his perspective on the way things were going, and talk. Obviously he's the head of the Tennessee Football Coaches Association. Talk to him about some of the stuff. When you're we're in a little bit different world this year, as we're all doing Zoom, so you kind of get that face to face, right? So he's staring at me last week on this phone call, and I can just tell he's steaming. I mean, I can tell he is mad as a hornet. Luckily, I had enough questions in the bag to not even ask him about the Bartlett game, because I did not want to go there. I mean, you could tell that these guys were going to bounce back, and I brought up the fact that, I don't think a lot of us thought Pope John Paul was going to be 4-0, but they do have a good football team. They're better. They're much improved. I wouldn't call them an NBA, or I wouldn't call them necessarily Brookwood Academy for sure, and some of those types of teams. But they really have hit that second tier. And as you mentioned, a good win for Christian Brothers last week, and luckily Coach didn't reach through the monitor and strangle me right in front of our audience. But so let's talk a little bit about what came out this week. And I guess I'm going to ask this question, and if you want to, you can answer it any way you want to. I'm not going to try to lead you down the road here, but why is Memphis, not just Memphis and not Shelby County alone, not because Shelby County has teams playing, but why is the Shelby County Special School District or Special School District the only area, the only teams in the state not playing football? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the question. It's one that's been asked literally hundreds of times here over the last few weeks. The answer in a nutshell, and we could you can theorize as to why this is from now until the cows come home, but the only answer I can give, and the truest answer that I can give you right now, is that the superintendent has deemed it not safe to do so. He made his announcement last week. He put out a video that pointed to some things that were while true, we're not necessarily indicative of the whole picture. Our case rate in Shelby County has consistently been declining. All our measurable metrics here in Shelby County have been declining over the last several weeks. We're in a better place than we have been for many weeks. And like you said, schools like the municipal schools, Houston and Arlington and Bartlett, they're showing it can be done. The private schools are showing it can be done. The rest of the state is showing it can be done. And here with Metro Nashville coming back on Friday, it's mind-boggling, but it really is. It really is just coming down to the simple fact that the superintendent, his public position is it's not safe to do so, and he is therefore not allowing these guys to get back to it.
Does he realize what he looks like right now with everybody else playing and doing it, even if they have to postpone games because you got 3 kids that got it and you got 7 that have been, contact traced, and so you're out. Look, my son plays on a very small school football team in Division II, and they've got, I guess, 35 players, and they had 9 guys out last week, and they still played. And so there's no hospitalizations. I can't tell you how many coaches I've talked to. No hospitalizations for us. Kid can't taste anything, or can't smell anything, or he's got the sniffles. The look for this gentleman, for that group, I mean, it just looks really bad and quite frankly political. And at the end of the day, and it's like I think I responded to maybe a tweet you had the other day, but it's just really sad. That's the way I view it as much as anything. It's just sad for those kids.
It is sad. It is sad, and we had it's hard for me to estimate numbers. We had a protest here the day after the decision was rendered, and I would say maybe 75 to 100 players and parents were down at the school board, and some of them made speeches and kind of said their piece as to why they were there. And of course, I interviewed some of them and did a story on it. And you're right, that's the prevailing sentiment for these kids. It's just sadness. Over and over, it's the same thing. We work so hard. We've been doing everything that's been told of us. Everything that's been asked of us to do since June. We've stayed safe. We don't have coronavirus. We're taking all the precautions. We're doing everything you guys have told us to do. And yet, when D-Day comes, they don't get the news that they were hoping for. It's just really sad. It's going to hurt futures. And like I said, the effects of this are going to be seen not just immediately. We're already seeing the immediate effects. We're going to see long-term effects down the road. We might see programs actually, shut down because of this, because of the financial implications of this. We already have quite a few schools in Memphis that are kind of just hanging on by a thread anyway. They need these games against people like Christian Brothers and Bartlett and Arlington, from a financial standpoint, to keep the programs going. And now they don't have this year. So, that's one aspect of it. The whole scholarship thing is another aspect of it. I mean, it's just really sad. Like you said, that's the best word, sad and unfortunate. And to answer your original question, I don't know if he realizes what he looks like. And honestly, I don't think he cares, because he is kind of dug in and convinced himself that he's doing this, quote unquote, for the kids. And, there's a mountain of evidence to support that maybe he's not actually acting in the best interest of the kids because of, the opportunities that a lot of these kids will be losing. I honestly don't think he cares what the rest of the state thinks he looks like, to be honest, frankly.
Well, here's the thing. I hope he understands their repercussions, and I hope that in time those repercussions are felt by him. And I'll leave it at that. He is John Varlas of the Daily Memphian. Make sure you go check out their website and all the work they do, the great work they do there in Memphis, covering all sports. And we're going to take a quick break and come back with more. You're listening to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office.
Welcome back to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office, to remind you to designate a sober game plan. If you've been drinking, don't drive. Fans don't let fans drive drunk. Tim Rogers from WBFG joins us out in the West Tennessee area. We talked with John Varlas in Memphis. Things are pretty different there for sure, but I don't think you guys have been affected a lot by the COVID. I know some, but kind of bring us up to date on that.
Yeah, we have not had a lot of games over in West Tennessee affected by it. A few teams have had to take the forfeit or I don't know what you call it exactly, the no win, no decision, and the other team gets the win. But we've had that very, very rarely. But we did have a big game Friday night that had to be affected by COVID, and that was a Haywood-Dyersburg game.
We'll go ahead and talk about it.
Well, that game, of course, for the last several years has been the game that decided that region champion. And this is very early in the season for that game to happen. And I think that what I've understood is that Dyersburg was the team that had to give the loss or give up the game because of the COVID. And so Haywood was awarded the win. And so I would say that pretty much puts Haywood in the driver's seat in that region.
One that did get played right there in Jackson Christian in USJ, 16-14. Jackson Christian gets the win.
That was in my mind, a shocker. I thought, I thought it'd be a good game, but I didn't think that Jackson Christian would beat them, and I also didn't think it would be that low a scoring game. I thought if it was a close game, it'd be 35-31, but obviously good defense, and Jackson Christian's 5-0 for the first time in years, and that's a huge win for them.
Dresden loves to play overtime games, I guess. They had another one with Greenfield last weekend. They went 4 overtimes. This time they lose in the first overtime to Greenfield 18-12.
That's a big county rivalry, as you know. Greenfield and Dresden are about 10 miles apart from each other, and normally Dresden's had the upper hand, but Greenfield's has improved a lot in the last several years. Of course, they're 4-0 in that region right now, and I'd say that them in Lake County are going to be the challengers for that region championship.
Peabody continues to roll. Is anybody going to stop them, the defending state champions?
It sure doesn't look like it, because if Adamsville couldn't put up a better fight than 42-7, Peabody's just too good.
Covington's had a great run recently. Again, they win big over Westview, 48-0.
That game stunned me, not because Covington won, but because they held Martin in their high-powered offense. Ty Simpson and the quarterback held them to no points. I was stunned by that.
Hardin County also, I think, number 2 in the state, 5-0, beats Jackson Southside, and Hardin County looks like they're for real.
Yeah, they've not been tested at all. I mean, they have just cruised in all their games so far, and I don't see anybody on the schedule giving them a battle down to the end. So I expect Hardin County to go in the playoffs 10-0.
Tim, as we talked off air, I'm not sure I can always trust a schedule when I see one, but what I see here is Huntington got a COVID win over McEwen, setting up next weekend's matchup with Milan. It should be a good one, both of them 4-1.
Yeah, that's the way I understood it too. I'm looking at our slate here, and it looks like that's what happened. Huntington did get the COVID win, and they started off with that loss to McKenzie, but they're coming around. Even though they didn't actually play Friday night, that Huntington's coming into form.
Lexington right there in your backyard, 24-14 to win. They're 4-1.
Yeah, they had a good game Friday night. They jumped out to a lead at 21-7, and I think they kicked the field goal. And then I think Northside may have tacked on a touchdown at the end. But Lexington bounced back from their loss to Milan last week, and I thought that was good for them. But of course, they've got Crockett County this week, and they got Hardin County looming out in the next few weeks.
Tim Rogers, our guest from WBFG in West Tennessee.
Tim Tack had taken all my good questions this week, so
got them all.
I had them all. I mean, I'm sitting here like just clicking between screens and schedule. As soon as I get there, he's like, "Hey, let's talk about so-and-so."
This is time to test your knowledge here, Chris.
I mean, my goodness. All right, so let's talk about this Lexington Crockett County game this week. Obviously, as you mentioned, a big win, big bounce back win over Northside last week. This Crockett County team is on the field anyway, 2-2. They do have that COVID win over Lake County back earlier in the year. Beat Millington last week. Losses to Dyer County by a couple of touchdowns and South Gibson by a couple of touchdowns. I got to think Lexington's a favorite going into this ball game, but Crockett County is no, they've certainly got a tradition as well and they've played some good football.
No doubt about it. And over the last, I guess, 10 years or so since they've been playing each other, historically, Lexington has not played well over at Crockett County, so they'll have to come with their A game. But I believe this Lexington team's got to focus on them. After they lost that game last week to Milan, I think you'll see a different team.
Let's hop on down. We talked about Trenton and how good they are. Nobody's going to beat them. And there was a team in Memphis. A lot of people had high thoughts of going to playoffs, but that ain't going to happen.
Doesn't look like it, does it?
No, it doesn't, and that's a shame for those kids.
It really is.
Memphis, and as we discussed with John, but this Union City got a nice win over Gibson County a week ago. They have won 3 in a row, including a win over Adamsville. They got Southside this week, and then they've got Trenton the week after, obviously, which will be a tough challenge. But you look at the back half of really Union City's schedule. They got Jackson Southside, they got Peabody, they got Dyersburg, and they got McKenzie still looming out there, all in a row here coming up. But they've got Southside this week, and it's a Union City team that, as you talked about before, Tim, probably not what we've seen with some of their state championship caliber football teams, but they're scrappy, and they played some pretty good defense these last few weeks. And even though I think it'll be a tough challenge against Southside.
And they've been playing Southside the last several years, even though both teams are in different classifications. And that game has just been a 7-0, 14-7 game every year. And so it should be a good game. But we really don't know a lot about Southside so far, simply because they haven't played 2 games.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. One thing that I'm having a little bit of trouble figuring out how good they are, and I think they're pretty good. They beat Huntington. They only lost by a couple of touchdowns in a pretty good ball game to Trenton, and that's McKenzie. But those are the only 2 ball games they played so far. They've got Humboldt this week, assuming everybody stays healthy. How good could this McKenzie team be?
I believe they are pretty good, but it's just the continuity of not playing, from week to week, having a COVID game or a called off game or whatever happens every week. They've got to get it done on the field, and I think playing is going to be the biggest thing. If they can just play 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like one off, one on, one off type of deal for those guys.
That's basically what it's been for them.
Lake County's only a loss. And we saw what they did a year ago. Very impressed with them. And that really last few years. Only loss is a COVID loss. The Crockett County week 1, they beat Dresden, as we know. Dresden likes to play tough post ball games. Then they beat Humboldt. But you talked about that Westview team a little earlier. They have to go to Westview this upcoming week, and that's going to be a heck of a challenge for even Lake County, who's a really good football team.
Sure, and Lake County, I think, pretty much had their way with Westview last year, and they scored 60 points or something in that game. I don't see that happening again this year, but I do think that this is a big game for both teams because we've got to see how Westview's going to bounce back from that, as I said, stunning loss. I mean, I never saw 48-0 coming. So it could be one of those hangover games for Westview. Who knows? But I do expect it to be a good game.
That brings me to my next question, and that's how good is Covington? I mean, to put 48 up is really good, but to blank them, as you said, I mean, you don't do. I mean, that guy's one of the top quarterbacks in the country. You don't just go in and blank those guys. Now, again, as Tim and I have talked about throughout the evening, you don't know who played and who didn't play in that particular ball.
That's right.
We're good receivers in, out. They have a full complement, not have a full complement. You don't know, so it's tough to say. But still, this Covington football team, in my mind, is on a collision course. Potentially in AAA to make it to a state championship game.
Yeah, I think so too. That as y'all both know, this has been a very good football team for a long time, and with a couple of appearances at Cookeville. But I believe this team may be better than the other 2. I just think they've got a lot of different ways they can hurt you. And obviously, if they can shut down one of the top quarterbacks in the nation, they got an excellent defense and a fine secondary, I would say.
Yep, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. He is Tim Rogers. He's obviously with our affiliate there in the West Tennessee area, WBFG and Parker's Crossroads. We appreciate him, as he does every week, taking some time to join us and talk to us. And obviously, enjoy being on the station with all those guys. They do a great job, and one of the best, if not the best, I consider the best post-game show. I sound like Donald Trump there for a second. It's huge, it's wonderful, it's the best. But it is really good, and make sure you guys check it out there in Parker's Crossroads. We're going to take a quick break and come back with more. You're listening to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office.
Welcome into this edition of Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office. To remind you that drunk driving is the ultimate form of unsportsmanlike conduct. Fans don't let fans drive drunk. I'm Tim Tackett. Our producer is Jacob Underwood. I'm now joined by Mr. Tennessee Prep Weekly himself, Chris Eats. Chris, this season has brought crazy things. As I went to the undefeated list this time, there's 45 undefeated teams as I count them in Tennessee. 22 of them are 5-0, 16 are 4-0, 3 of them are 3-0, 2 are 2-0, and 2 of them are 1-0. I mean, that's never happened before.
If it has, I've never seen it. I mean, it's really just, as you said, a screwy year, a weird year. You know, I was actually looking at that undefeated list too, and it was like, how do you know? I mean, some of these 5-0 or 3 COVID wins in a
sure.
I couldn't go through all of those schedules and keep up and tell you. It's bizarre, and as you and I talked about a little earlier, that you had a team this week get a win and a loss.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just a different year and a different deal. But for me, I think I'm glad everybody starts playing this week, except for the special school district there in Shelby County. Lots of teams in Shelby County playing, but the special school district there is not. Or the Shelby County School District, I should say, has decided not to, and so. We'll talk to John Varlas later in the program about that, but outside of that, I'm hoping that this week we get as many games in as we can, and certainly these Metro games in Nashville that need to be played in order to find some semblance over a 5-game schedule of, what kind of seeding you would have for the playoffs for these teams. So it's going to be very interesting, Tim, to try to figure this whole thing out. But at least the kids are playing, and for me, that's the win.
Chris, once upon a time we had what was called week 0. So after week 5, you actually could be 6-0 because you played a week 0 game. Now we've got it straightened out. We've played 1 through 11. Bartlett is actually 6-1 after week 5. They've got 2 COVID wins. This past weekend, for example, they got a COVID win over Cordova and then went out on Saturday night and beat South Haven, Mississippi 27-0. So they put 2 wins on the board in a 24-hour period of time.
Yep, exactly. Just the bizarreness of that whole thing. But, I respect those teams. First, there's 2 things that I've enjoyed seeing. That teams will say, okay, I get a COVID win, but they're not sitting there and not
sure.
playing. They go find a game. Okay, Knox Central and Powell find a game. So you get a COVID win and you get a COVID loss, but you went out and played. The kids get out there and went against each other and played. And so I respect that a lot. I also respect a lot of these coaches that, when it comes to these key region matchups, say, you know what, I've got a week later in the year where I'm playing a non-region team, and you're playing that week against a non-region team, or you're playing a region team, and we can shuffle things around to make sure that the region games are played.
Sure.
And I've seen a lot of that too, and I really like that. So, there are some regions you can't get away with that because you've got so many teams. But at the same time, I think a lot of coaches have tried to do it the right way. A lot of administrators have tried to do it the right way, and I appreciate that, even above and beyond the fact that these kids are out there playing.
Chris, you mentioned Memphis still not playing the largest school district in the state, but the second largest school district in the state, Nashville Metro Schools, will begin playing this Friday night. What can we expect from this? Those kids and coaches have had to persevere through some really tough times to practice. You went through football practice before. 3 weeks of playing to practice without playing. They've gone through 7 or 8.
They have, and I'm sure. I'm interested. For example, this week is a good matchup. You got Hillsborough and Burcombe playing. How ready are those guys? Like how from a physical contact perspective, they've had a couple of weeks, I guess. Maybe they've had a little bit more with shoulder pads and helmets. I don't know, and so I don't know what to expect from those teams. I look at what Ken Niumatalolo did with Navy in the offseason. They didn't hit, and they went out there and played a bunch of 25-year-old guys at BYU because they all go do their mission and they come back and they play, and so they're all grown men.
Yes.
And just getting mowed down by BYU because BYU's certainly going to be hitting people. That's what they didn't do that. Half of them would leave. And so, you've seen that they got some of the biggest Samoan men you've ever seen. We saw people in Tennessee saw what happened last year when they played Tennessee. The difference was kids versus men in that particular ballgame, the physicality of it. So how much physical play have these guys been doing? How much are they trying to keep their kids fresh? How many of them are making sure they work with some sort of distancing for COVID? I don't know. And so even after this week, you're not going to know, who's good. And that's what makes, I think, to some degree, this 5-game schedule almost impossible, but yet beyond intriguing to watch and see how it plays out because, a season can be a marathon. This is no marathon. This is a sprint to get to the playoffs.
Make it to the playoffs because, as you mentioned before, some teams have already lost some COVID games. It's really going to be a disaster if one of our top 2 or 3 teams in the classification ends up losing a COVID game to start the playoff system. Right.
And then what happens if when we get to week 11, 12, 13, 14, and you have an outbreak? That's going to happen. A team that's heavily favored,
sure,
beat somebody else, it's going to happen, and they're going to lose. And as one coach told me, this is a great year for the best team in the state in certain classifications, perhaps the most talented, to not win because you never know when this thing's going to pop up. You never know what it's going to do in a school. You don't know what it's going to do on a football team. I'll be interested, and here's another point real quick. I'll be interested to see if coaches start taking especially with their older players or their starters in particular, are too deep, the school from home. To try to keep them COVID-free from school.
Sure.
We'll see.
We're going to visit reporters across the state of Tennessee in just a bit. You're listening to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this edition of Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office. There's no need to designate a sober game plan. If you've been drinking, don't drive. Fans, don't let fans drive drunk. Chris, we've talked about some positives, some negatives. One positive that 2020 has brought to us this year is October weather in September. I don't know, I'm going to guess Friday night you set out in a very nice deal, and it felt like Halloween, did it?
It really did, but I actually stayed home and watched the ball game because at our particular school, we've had some adults that had come down with it, with COVID, and I was playing it safe on Friday night. So I got to watch the game on YouTube about 5 minutes down the road from the school, but I walked outside a couple of times to walk the dog, among other things, and what a great night. Weather's been fantastic. It's been a pleasant break. Oh, I even worked outside a lot this past weekend, Tim. So, if you get me out of the house working in the yard, then you know that the weather's going to be at least decent because I'm not getting out there in 100 degrees.
Well, 2020, because of computer, internet works and so forth, schools are now able to work from home, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And people like you are able to stay at home and watch football games even when the capacity is down. A lot of people are choosing to go that direction.
They are, and you have to be smart about it. I have some pre-existing challenges. For me, I have to be more careful than the average person. And so I take that seriously and just play it smart and try to do the right thing. I think the other part for me that's easier about it, too, is my son's a freshman and he's not going to play much because he's a freshman. That's just the way, I wouldn't miss a JV game for the world. But I also know at the JV game, they're, a couple hundred people, right? It's not a packed house type of thing. So I get to play it a little bit closer. If he were a senior or junior or something, that'd be a different story. But for me, the technology's been great. And the fact that you can do it, look, where his stadium is, there is one bar of cell signal for anything out there. But yet they can stream the games live, not only at home, but on the road and some other remote places. for Division I single A ball, that you watch at the house. And I think it's pretty amazing, and have really enjoyed how that technology has evolved recently.
Chris, outside of the COVID situation, how's the season fared in the first half? We're basically halfway through the season. Is it gone fairly well as far as the top teams and in the classifications, the way you would see it?
I mean, it has. I think, to me, it's been the hardest season ever. And I guess you expect it, but when you go through it, it's even harder than maybe you thought. It's hard to see. I have a close friend that is a coach and came, was contracted this thing and has had to sit out for a couple of weeks. And it's way harder than I thought. I knew it'd be hard, but I didn't know it'd be this hard. And watching these games canceled for COVID, just trying to play through this stuff. You never know who's playing. I mean, they could be playing on a Thursday and have a completely different game when you show up at the stadium on a Friday night. It's the hardest season ever for coaches in particular and parents, but coaches are trying to do this, and most of them are trying to do it the right way. And I'm thankful for those guys. They do an amazing amount of work with these kids, and I hope that people are thankful across the board for just getting an opportunity to play this year.
Players, Chris, what is the group of seniors like this year coming out of Tennessee compared to the past years? Would you rank it as toward the top, or middle ways? What do you think?
I would say that they are not quite what they have been in recent years. I think there's some underclassmen, juniors and below that you're looking at really, I think there's some really good classes coming. I think this one took a little bit of a dip this year. I don't think it's quite as deep as we've seen in recent years. I don't think you're going to find you're going to find the Brenning Stools out there, and you're going to find name escapes me, the other kids from Ravenwood that are going to the Michigans, they're going to the big schools, and they're going to Clemson's and those types of things. I don't think as many of them are this year, and so I think what you'll see is a lot of kids play college ball. It's going to be deep from that perspective, but Power 5, I don't know that you'll see nearly the number that maybe we've seen in over the last 5 years, let's say 6 years. And so I think it's down a little bit from that perspective, just as seniors are concerned, but I'm not sure that the depth isn't more, and the top end, high 5-star quality isn't a little bit less.
Chris, in the minute we've got left, I would ask this: is how much of this might have been because of no fall practice, no 7-on-7, no going to summer camps where college coaches can kind of look over a little bit? Anything to that at all?
I don't think so, and I'll just, my son participates from time to time with NPA and National Playmakers with Buck and those guys out there, and it was just not quite the top end talent level, but you're seeing a lot of kids kind of rise. So I think there are a number of 3- and 4-star kids out there that are going to be really good college football players. I think there's some that are going to be excellent football players. I think you're more in the 10 neighborhood. The other part of that too, Tim, the one part that is hurt is Memphis not playing, because those guys could have gone out.
This edition of Tennessee Prep Weekly has been brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office. For Chris Eakes, producer Jacob Underwood, this is Tim Tackett. We'll be back next week at this time for more Tennessee Prep Weekly.